Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legends of Tomorrow, as well as the latest episode of Arrow. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time I'm going to start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Legends of Tomorrow, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Arrow. But the first thing I want to talk about is this week's episode of Legends of Tomorrow. A lot of interesting things went down, so let's break everything down. First and foremost, you had the whole situation with Ray. I thought that was kind of interesting because like he came in there being like, oh, I'm kind of having nightmares and stuff. I'm like, wait, what? It's like, you're in control a little bit? I guess because Neron's possession wasn't full. I guess, you know, Desmond's situation was a little bit different. I guess because a demon needs you to kind of completely submit, and I guess being stuck in hell for so long, Desmond's spirits just got broken. So I guess, and Neron probably wore him down more and more, but probably also just being stuck in hell was enough. But it's so interesting because like a demon possession doesn't give him full possession over you. It just gives him enough to kind of get enough wiggle room. But Ray being, you know, still conscious and fully it being still his body, Neron is able to stay in control, and he can get full possession either by having Ray submit, or he could have Ray kill the person he loves. I even love it later on because Gary gets involved in everything, and it's like, he's like, come on, you don't want to have to kill someone you love, and Ray's like, oh, I like you, Gary, and Gary's like, oh, no, he's like, no, I get it. I was like, that's the saddest way to find out that someone doesn't really love you, is that aspect of it. Also, it's so interesting because I obviously like Gary. It's so sad because Gary being kind of the butt of the joke, and it's so real because he's the butt of the joke in the show and obviously outside of the show too, because in the regard of like everyone kind of just telling him, shut up, Gary, you're annoying, Gary. No one really takes him seriously. The legends don't really care too much about him. Constantine kind of treats him like, you know, it's like, oh, I'm supposed to just water your plants and stuff like that, because he was even like, oh, I'm kind of, you know, an intern, you know, master of the dark arts and stuff like that. But it's just, and even at the Time Bureau, he's at the bottom of the barrel. So for him, he just feels so low. And I think, you know, because Gary puts on a smile and everything, but it's hiding his insecurities, his deep, deep, low self-esteem. Which, you know, I can relate to. So you kind of feel bad for Gary. It's so interesting to show you seeing what this show is, because obviously Neron's like, oh, I can make you complete and stuff, and you're like, what does that mean? I guess it's like, oh, fill you with pride and stuff like that. It's like, no, he may literally make you complete because he gave Gary his nipple back. Now that in itself shows you, it's like, this is the most craziness, that it's like his nipple from hell has returned to him. This is a storyline in Legends of Tomorrow. This is why this show is so fantastic. You cannot get this with any other show. It's so good. And basically him getting his hellish nipple back is, it makes him evil. I did not see that turning out the way it did. That's so interesting. And who would have expected out of anyone that Gary would go full-blown dark side? I mean, to be fair, it kind of makes sense because you got the two most unlikely dark side characters to go dark side, because you got Ray and you got Gary. It's sad with the whole Ray situation because Ray did it because it's like he didn't want to hurt Nate. It's like, yo, that's his bro, you know? And it's like, no, I won't let you hurt the people I care about. It's like, so fine, as long as you promise not to kill Nate or hurt him, I'll submit, you know? So that's the whole thing about demons. Like, even if they can't get a direct way of getting to you, of course they're going to find a loophole through this whole situation. So now we have Ray and Gary, and they took Constantine's time stone, so they're all time traveling, causing havoc, while there's also still all those Mithries running around, which is kind of an interesting thing. So that's one side of things. Another side of things I love was the whole, like, Sarah hooking like Nate and Zarya up on a date and stuff like that. I even love it, like Ava's like, I'm getting more like just a friend's vibe, and it's like, no, totally not. And it's like they make a bet on it. Sarah kind of orchestrates him going on a mission alone. It's like, you're jeopardizing a mission just on a chance that they might hook up. And she's like, yep. Yeah, look at me being, because I love Sarah. It's like, the things you do and saying are very irresponsible, but you say it with such pride. I even love her being like to Zarya. It's like, no, you know, I'm an expert in this love situation, so I help you out. And Zarya's like, no. It's so interesting that like Sarah makes it seem like, oh yeah, I got this whole thing, a love thing figured out. It's like you literally just had stuff figured out for you last episode, so you're still figuring this out too. So it's just interesting that you're gonna give people love advice when you're still kind of figuring things out. Like obviously you and Ava are in a really good spot again, so obviously it just makes you suddenly like, oh, I know all about love. I got this thing figured out. It's just kind of adorable, and I love that aspect to it. I also love, like, she was like, oh, she kept making excuses not to read the book, and ultimately she was running, and she ended up listening to it on audiobook, and I love that she actually listened to it sped up, too. I was like, you're just going to retain some of the information. It's like, no, she ends up talking about it later, and she's like, actually, I really liked the book, which was kind of interesting. Because it's that whole conversation from the last episode of like, oh yeah, Sarah really, you know, she's more the adventuring type and stuff like that. So like the more mundane aspect she doesn't really like. Because there's this whole book club thing. And it turns out Ava doesn't even read the book. She mostly just shows up for like the wine and just relaxes and just lets Mona talk. Because she's the one that talks the most about the book. But Sarah ends up kind of talking to her about it and everything. It seems like it's kind of like a romance novel. But it also seems like, well, it doesn't seem like it's a romance novel. Well, it seems like a little bit, but it's more like a romantic murder mystery, at least kind of what we were picking up on it. But I love Sarah kind of getting invested in everything, and she kind of applies certain things from that to be like, oh yeah, this is just like in the book during everything. Like Nate and, you know, kind of getting back to it, like Nate and Zari look so adorable. It's like, dude, especially early in the episode when they're cracking jokes about the mummy and everything, and Zari's like, haha, I'm like, you've never seen Zari like that before. It's so good. It's so cute and adorable. It's like you can tell they really are into each other because they're just like, haha, haha. Like they act like nervous teenagers around each other, like kind of like that butterfly feeling. You can tell they get it, and I think it's just the most adorable thing ever. I think they're going to make such an adorable couple because obviously like Nate, you know the heartbreak of the whole Amaya situation, and Zari, you can honestly be like Zari needs there needs to be even more good in Zari's life because considering the world, well, the time she comes from, which now you even think about it, I didn't even think about that until now. It's like that's a whole complicated mess in itself. I didn't even think about that till now. It's like he's falling in love with two women from time periods that aren't his own necessarily, because obviously Amaya from the past and now Zari from the future. I didn't even think about till now. It's like, wow, I guess the argument could be like, oh, Nate has a type. Girls from a different time period that sadly he probably can never always stay with because Zari will probably eventually have to go back to her own time, which is, I mean, Nate would be alive then, but he'd be an older man, and he probably had lived out his life by the time you get to that point in Zari's history, so it's a whole thing. So I don't know, it was just something interesting just floating in my head to it just now. Like I said, that's probably like the sad side of this situation, but why get always bummed out about it? Just enjoy the good that's here now. Them kind of being on almost like an Indiana Jones adventure type of date. It's like, oh, like someone's going to have to squeeze past all these trap wires. And Zari's like, no, it's going to be me. He's like, no, I'm going to ask you to hold my coat. And he's the one doing it. And you have Zari kind of staring. I'm like, okay, I like that. What's that movie with Catherine Zeta-Jones that obviously they're referencing? It's, I'm blanking on it because it's that exact thing from it, but I don't remember. It's not Entrapment, is it? It's a different movie. I'm blanking on it. Either way, I love them being like, oh, this is totally Sarah coming up with this whole thing. She's got this whole thing planned out, which I think their first mistake in thinking like that is like, you think Sarah thought this in advance? Sarah's kind of like fly by the seat of her pants. She kind of goes full speed ahead. It's kind of what Ava was talking about before. It's like, Sarah doesn't plan things that much in advance. She's kind of like go with the flow. That's kind of Sarah's thing. Kind of has been Sarah's thing for a while, so that's how I feel about it. But maybe I'm wrong about it. But I feel like Sarah wouldn't have planned things out to this much detail to get like fake Nazis and make it a whole adventure like that and stuff. I even love Zari being like, look at us. We did this without causing much incident or having even a problem. We did this, not the typical Legends way of kind of bumbling and screwing things up. It's like, dude, like the worst thing is some dude of non-existence, no dude of any relevance timeline-wise might have gotten like, some brain damage or something, but who cares, So I even love when they get when Zari and Nate get free, they're about to kiss, and Ava and Sarah show up. It's like, oh, she's like, see, I told you they were fine, and they were about to make out. Ava's like, what? No, were you guys about to make out? And then like Nate's like, well, maybe something's about to happen. Zari's like, no, and then Sarah and Ava look to each other like, see, I just love this being a whole thing. Also, got to give it up to Sarah and Ava. It's kind of interesting because in their relationship, they're both the Indiana Jones, like the way they're handling that whole situation. And I love Sarah had to take it to like a cat to make it dirty, being like, like seeing Ava using the whip and everything. It's like, oh, kind of got me inspired for, what was it, for like date night or something? It's like, oh, the cute, adorable, dirty talk, dude. It's incredible. So there's that. All the while, there's the whole situation with Romanticon, because also we ended up finding out that Mick gets a whole bunch of fan letters. In actuality, he also reads it too. I love that the main incentive for actually going was Charlie and Mick being a little greedy. It's like, oh yeah, there's $20,000. We can do this. Because Charlie's like, you don't even have to be Rebecca. It's like, I can play the role of Rebecca. I even love later on when she shows up like, oh, this is what I look like, and he just switches her glasses out. He's like, now you're perfect. It's nice to see the very sensitive side of Rory, because he doesn't show it much. Because even Charlie was like, I thought this was just you kind of laughing at people, because it turns out he even responds to some of the fan letters, and it's like, I guess you could make the argument that's why Mick is the way he is, because obviously his upbringing and just kind of the world he grew up in, kind of surrounded by criminals and everything, that he kind of internalized a lot of stuff. And I think for him he seeks connection secretly. Excuse me. He seeks connections with people. He enjoys that aspect. And I think for someone who's kind of cut himself off from people for a long time, I think obviously that's something that got ignited in him when he became a part of the Legends. He grew a connection, even though he kind of acts all grumpy and stuff like that. He connects with the Legends. They are his family. And, I think that place inside of him is where he writes from, that want to connect with people, kind of speak your truth, speak your heart, And I love like Charlie trying to play the role and everything until Mona gets there. I love Ava and Sarah laughing because I was like, right, Mona still doesn't know that he's Rebecca Silver, and they all know, so they're like, yeah, get plenty of pictures. But obviously Mona exposes Rebecca, and then you get Mick on a mic, and he's like, he says some stuff, and Mona's like, oh my god, that's totally Rebecca Silver, and everyone's in the crowd's getting excited and everything, like, oh, I'm like, dude, it's so good, because it's so interesting, because obviously it's that aspect of like, obviously him as Rebecca is the polar opposite to who he is as Mick, but I guess you could, like I said, you can make the argument like Rebecca is a part of who he is. That's a part of Mick that he kind of keeps buried. Or maybe the argument could be that's who Mick really is at his core, but obviously he created this tough exterior, this tough shell to kind of hide himself away, Like I said, just to deal with everything in his life. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat in the long run. So I just love that continues to be a storyline about him being a writer, this pseudonym and everything. Dude, it's going to be crazy because now the Arrowverse canon is going to expand, and it's going to be like we're going to be seeing Mick's picture all over these books, and like at some point there's going to be a newspaper that says like makes a reference to the fact is that he's been revealed as like a like I said, because it isn't just a Legends thing, because I talked about it before, like when the show came back from its break, that Barry was actually reading the book when he was locked up in the pipeline for a little bit, and he was like, actually, it's pretty good, so I guess only those within the know that. I wonder, was it Mick that actually gave him the book, or was it someone else? Was it like Ray or Sarah or something that actually gave him a book? I mean, like out of anyone, it makes sense if Mick did give him a book, just because it's like, well, him and Barry were originally adversaries. So either way, it's just kind of interesting in the long run to think about all that. So there's that. We got Nate and Zari together, kissing and everything. I was like, dude, stop being so damn adorable. All this damn love floating around. As someone like me who has such a fantasized notion of love, it's too much. The romanticism is too strong. I love it. But there are some interesting things. Like one, the dragon egg they ended up retrieving from this episode. Interesting, because let's not forget the first other supernatural thing that came out of this whole situation at the end of season 3 when they released Malice was a dragon that Constantine showed up with its severed head. I'm like, that's its mom, isn't it? That's going to be interesting. It'd be really interesting if we end up having the dragon latch on to, it gets born and it probably latches on. There's multiple people it could end up latching on to, maybe Ava and Sarah, and it turns to that whole situation of them kind of having to be parents. It could latch on to Mick, and that'd be a whole thing in itself. Or it can latch on to Zari and Nate, where they're kind of figuring things out, or maybe Mona. It's probably going to be like the Legends, got mascot to it. I don't know. I'm so interested to see what ends up happening about that. They're probably going to feel a little bad because it's like, oh, this thing's probably its parents, that dragon that already died. But it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening, if that ends up being the case or not. But I am curious to see what is Neron going to do. Obviously, going through time, causing havoc, because obviously his whole plan is to spread so much chaos and fear that people, spread so many mystical creatures around, was the original plan, so that he could get control, spread it around to make it so that people would be willing to give up their soul. So there's that whole situation. I almost let it slip my mind. Ava's bringing Nora into the field to kind of help track down Neron, not just by herself as just Nora, but as a member of the Time Bureau. Did not see that coming. It's like, yo! So I think when this is all said and done, that's probably going to continue being Nora's job, maybe, potentially, we could see. I think that'd be interesting if that is the case. Nora's not the type to really kind of do well with authority, but obviously it's like for the sake of hunting down Neron and saving Rey, but that might complicate things more because it's about saving someone you care about, so obviously you're going to be... I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how this whole situation plays out. Like I said, I'm so excited to see what the next episode has in store for us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Arrow, a lot of interesting things went down in this episode. I really like how they constructed this episode. Kind of basically it's that whole thing of you get a little bit at a time of the story, obviously from different people's perspectives, and it's hard to say who's not telling the truth. I bet you if you actually go back through it and look at everyone's recounts of everything going down, you probably could find out the truth of it all, because with every lie there is some truth put in it, because a lot of the characters ended up saying truthful stuff, but it's interesting how everything kind of went from one person to the other, and just obviously everyone's kind of keeping it secret, and it's they're all kind of pointing the finger in certain directions. I guess it's the whole point was to kind of make it believable in the end when they point it all to Emiko, because if they kind of hide facts and okay, yes, because it's interesting too, because I should have figured Dinah was in on it, and I kind of had this feeling because, the fact is Dinah was pushing that hard. The fact of the matter is, if it were any other circumstances, especially that she's good with the team and everything, I feel like Dinah would have kind of softballed things, but her going as hard as she was, I was like, that's the kind of... Well, obviously, you could also make the argument that's just her way of showing that she isn't biased in this situation, but I guess that's the whole point, to appear not biased. And so, even her pushing him to admit, yeah, Emiko, admit your connection to her. It's why would you want that to be a thing? And even the point that Oliver was paying attention to the camera, I thought that was kind of interesting. It's I guess the whole point was to kind of, hoping that someone got rid of the recordings at that time, or what. Well, that's about other security cameras later on, but I guess it's just to kind of make sure that it was recording and captured all of this to kind of make the setup complete or whatever. It was just kind of interesting, kind of getting the story told like that. And I love Felicity out of anyone. She's taking it, not that she's taking it at least serious, but Felicity is who she is. And so under pressure, she kind of cracks a little bit. Not necessarily she cracked. She kept it. I mean, she kept eating food, and even Dinah's yeah, we had to restrict some of your food privileges now. I think you've exceeded how much you're allowed to get. Obviously, she's eating for two and everything. I even love her, hugging Roy and everything, and then she's trying to pretend like everything's cool and everything. She's no, fine. It's it's whatever. I mean, why would things kind of be any different? I mean, things wouldn't be different. And she's like, what? Yeah. And kind of leaning on Oliver. You should probably have Oliver just being like, you can stop Felicity. Which I just kind of skipped over it. Holy shit! Did not expect to see that, the whole Roy situation. I mean, to be fair, it makes sense. I mean, he's there in the future, but still, it's I didn't expect you to come back. We did kind of get a little bit insight of what's going on with her, with him, Nyssa, and Thea. It's Thea's doing good. Nyssa and him, all the three of them ended up destroying two of the Lazarus Pits, because I thought that was so interesting, because I was like, when the conversation came up before about, oh, where has Roy been up to, it's like, yeah, he's been on vacation, he hasn't sent any letters or something. It's like, the team knows exactly where he was. I also love it, it's like, oh, we haven't seen him since this and that, and Dinah, brought that up, and Felicity's like, well, you might not remember this, Dinah, because this was like, during a point in time, you and the Team Arrow weren't on good terms. Well, Ricardo Diaz had kidnapped him and tortured him, trying to draw out Team Arrow, so there's that, which is like, oh yeah, Dinah and, of course, Dinah and Renee would know nothing about everything going on with Roy because they weren't on good terms with Team Arrow. So I guess that's another reason not to put his mission on him, because that's a whole thing of like having to explain, the Thanatos Guild, which I'm surprised that still hasn't circled back around. That might end up being something going forward. The fact is they kind of, like, 'cause we haven't heard that mentioned since last season. So I mean, the way they're going to put it, it basically has been a year since that whole situation went down, so I feel like that's probably set up for the future, but we'll see in the long run. But the fact of the matter is, it's like hiding the factors of what he's been up to, because like you'd have to explain that, the whole Lazarus Pit situation, the League of Assassins, like all that takes a lot of time, and that's a lot of stuff that no one's going to believe. It's like, does the general public or police really need to know all those details? Probably wouldn't believe you anyway, probably take away from your credibility, so probably want to shy over those details anyway. It's like, which is funny because, well, it's not worth it. I'll just leave it at that. Nevertheless, I did love that, obviously, the interesting conversation of like, yo, so why'd you bring me into this and not Thea? Well, don't want Thea to know about our, because it's not even Thea's half-sister, it's only Oliver's half-sister, which is like, man, your family, it's like, yeah, when you say that out loud too, like, you never thought about the continuation of just how complicated, well, I brought it up before, but hearing the context of like, oh, so you have to bring in Thea's complicated aspect of the whole Queen family, it's like, yeah, the family's just all kinds of super complicated, and it's like, I don't want to bring Thea into that, because it's like, for one, she already kind of got away from the complicated nature that is our family. She even got away from like this city, so she's doing good. The last thing Oliver want to do is tell her, drop that truth bomb on her, and kind of leave her to kind of deal with the ramifications of all that. It's like, no, she's good. He's like, I'm gonna tell her, after Emiko had gotten captured or something, but I'm sure that's still a call you would have been super reluctant to make it like, yeah, this is Emiko. She's kind of a terrorist. She's our half sister. Well, my half sister. It's a whole thing. Our dad, more lies and secrets, so that in itself is kind of interesting. So that's why Roy is here. I thought that was kind of interesting. But I kept wondering, like, the entire time, it's like, okay, so they are lying about something, but what is it that they're keeping? Why are they lying? I mean, what's all said and done, they were able to give enough to, like, the mayor for her to be content with everything, but that cop that was in the interrogation room with Dinah was like, no, there's definitely something here. Like, but Dinah's like, nope, it's kind of open and shut. I mean, it's like, oh, obviously Oliver was protecting his half-sister. He made it clear because Emiko's his half-sister. It's like, yeah, they were laying the groundwork for a lot of stuff to kind of play things out. And so things kind of had to be orchestrated the way they did. Certain information had to be dropped. It's like, it shows you because they had to orchestrate, they had to come up with this lie. And obviously they weren't working alone. Dinah probably knew exactly what line of questioning. Well, she is the lead interrogator in this, so she knew what line of questioning needed to be asked in what particular order to kind of lead them down a certain path that they went down. It actually, well, before I get to that, I also want to talk about the super badass action in this. First, Roy, first episode back this season, present day at least, and it's like, oh, I can't get to that behind the spinning fan. Let me just flip, shoot the arrow in, and it's like, yo, got it, because I'm not supposed to touch the floor, but I'm able to now because I took down a switch. Him fighting off the people from the Ninth Circle, Oliver kicking ass, which is pretty bad. Like, all of that combined, it's like, dude. So there's that, but like the reveal of Roy's situation, the moment it was like, oh, he did get knocked out. I was like, oh, or is it that he didn't get knocked out, but then I thought like, oh, he's going to get back up and knock them out. So it's like, oh, the continuation of the lie, but it's like, Roy is 100% a lie, because it turns out Roy ended up losing his mind. I'm like, oh, I was like, it had to be the, Lazarus Pit. I was like, he got resurrected, because, like, he's the only one that recognized that. Because obviously, like, Renee and Dinah wouldn't know anything about that, because to be fair, all that happened before they joined the team. So they would know nothing about the Lazarus Pit. Plus, they just happen to not be a part of the team when that stuff goes down. So, like, Diggle and Felicity, I wonder, did they recognize what had happened to Roy, or, because Oliver recognized it, because obviously he's seen two people he cares about go through it. He saw Sarah go through it, he saw Thea go through it. Basically, he ended up dying and they ended up resurrecting him. And obviously it seemed like he was in control, but for him it's like he doesn't know what set him off. I guess it was just like maybe the blow to his head kind of triggered something, like it knocked him unconscious and it just kind of activate that animalistic instinct, that kind of fight or flight, and that triggered the bloodlust inside of him because of the Lazarus pit. It was also interesting, he brought up a point I thought was kind of interesting, because obviously like he's been predisposed to this because of the Mirakuru, so maybe it kind of dislodged something that was already, kind of dislodged in him that the Lazarus pit kind of latched onto, so his situation is going to be a little bit different than everyone else's just because he's a little predisposed to it, because he thought he had it under control until this moment. But it's that conversation of like, yeah, the whole thing of keeping secrets from people and stuff like that, but it's like, the fact is, it's like, you guys didn't have to protect me. And Oliver's like, of course we're going to. The fact of the matter is, that's why, because even like Renee and, Dinah were like, we shouldn't have done that. But it's like, Roy is just as much a part of this team that I would do that for any of you guys too, essentially. And being like, the fact is that he has just as much part to play in this team as you guys are. And you have no idea what he's been through. Because once again, they don't know what he's been up to for the past year and, what mission he's been on. So there's that whole complicated thing, but it's kind of sad, just more because this adds another level to it, because remember, Roy killed cops before when he was under the Mirakuru, and they kind of hid that from him, and that guilt kind of stayed with him. So I'm curious, are we going to see a similar thing from this? Especially considering the fact that he thought he had himself under control. Maybe there was other extenuating circumstances to his situation, but we'll see. I think it was probably just being knocked out like that probably triggered it. Which that makes me wonder, is that why like Roy's in the situation he is in the future? Like why he was kind of on Lian Yu by himself, because he isolated himself, probably because his situation kept getting worse. So he probably isolated himself long enough to kind of learn how to control the Mirakuru. It makes you wonder, did he ever go to Deathstroke for help to kind of controlling that anger inside of him? Because like obviously like Deathstroke has had experience having the Mirakuru in his system for so long, so it's a kind of a similar thing. Or maybe Roy just kind of went off on his own, did some training, and was able to, because I'm trying to think like as we've seen him currently in the future, was he like that? I think he seems like he's cool, calm, and collected. It doesn't, so like, I mean, to be fair, it's like decades later, so he's probably figured things out. I mean, look at Sarah, that's not really an issue for her. It's not really an issue for Thea anymore. Well, no, Thea got cured. I forgot about that. But Sarah kind of had to like figure her situation out by herself, so I'm wondering if that's what the whole situation is. Nevertheless, that was just kind of an interesting little detail about Roy. Obviously, there's still a lot about like, because obviously we saw Nyssa training Mia, so there's that. But to be fair, that was like a young Mia, so that becomes the question of like, well, what about Thea? And remember, Roy kind of brought it up to William in the future, being like, yeah, that's not something, or I think it was William, but maybe to other people too. It wasn't a conversation he was really willing to have. Maybe some stuff happened because of the whole like Lazarus pit situation. Who knows? Or maybe it's just too painful that he had to isolate himself from them because he didn't want her to get caught up with him, just because he was too out of control, at least at that point in time. And he wanted her to kind of be off and be happy. Maybe that was after they completed their mission of getting rid of all the other Lazarus pits. Maybe, maybe not. We'll have to wait and see in that regard. Obviously, another interesting conversation is the whole one about Emiko, because you have Renee being like, yeah, she started off wanting to protect the Glades and everything, and obviously she wanted to avenge her mother. She killed Dante, which I am surprised. Like, I was like, oh, I thought maybe there's going to be more to the whole Dante situation. Like I said, maybe it was just pure coincidence, the whole whistling thing, but it's like, yeah, they're not going to bring over that supernatural side as much with, like, Arrow, because it's grounded to a certain extent, so so there's that aspect to it that I should have really thought about in the previous episode. But nevertheless, I was actually kind of surprised that she straight up killed Dante like that. But the fact is that Renee's like, because she did that, it shows that her mother's death means more to her. The fact is we can still reach her. Like, the fact is that, this is all because of your dad's situation. Like, if it wasn't for Robert, she would be fighting on our side right now, which even Oliver's like, yeah, I know she would, but the fact of the matter is there's a point where you have to just take responsibility for your own actions, which I guess is supposed to be the irony behind this whole situation, considering the fact that they covered up a crime and everything. But the fact of the matter is, like, Oliver's like, the fact is Emiko made her choice just like I made mine, and at the end of the day, Renee's got to make his. And when he ends up talking to Emiko, it's like, you can back away from this. The fact is, you killed Dante, you killed the leader, they'll kind of attack you for that. And it's like, no, they won't. I'm the leader. And so that's when it really hit Renee and be like, whoa. So, and basically in his mind, it's like everything he knew and thought he knew about Emiko was a lie. He thought, yes, she was driven by her mother's murder because she didn't really know, but it still doesn't change the fact is she harbors so much hate in her heart for Robert, wanting to destroy everything that he cared about, that city, and the same city that Oliver cares so much about because it's his legacy. So that's what this stems from, even given the opportunity, she still won't stop until like this is fulfilled, because she ends up revealing some interesting stuff to Oliver later on, pointing out, like, the reason this is all happening is because I want to destroy your legacy. Because obviously there's a conversation of like, oh yeah, who got rid of the surveillance footage? Oh, good job on that, Dinah. Felicity says that, but it's like, no, I didn't do it. I thought you handled it. She's like, no, I didn't. Turns out she's the one that had the security footage because she's trying to destroy their legacy. And now it makes sense how we went from the vigilantes working with the SCPD to them being like the most hated people in Star City. So I'm thinking it's a combination of what she did, also like what Emiko's doing, like she might get her attack off, and that might be what eventually sends everything spiraling down to that point. Probably not the case. She probably is going to fail, but her job of destroying their legacy forever, vigilantes will probably demonize from that point on, because at that point it's like, not only did you commit crimes, you covered up a crime so they can never be trusted anymore. Like, they're all culpable in this, even Dinah. So her position as captain is threatened as well. So she's basically burning everything that they represent because it's her way to get revenge. It's like, only then will I get justice for and it's so sad, like, that, because she blames Robert. Yes, he did some shitty things, but to do what you're doing, causing so much death and mayhem, for her, it's like burning this city is the only thing that's going to make things right. Because at the end of the day, even after all these years, she's still that little girl longing for her dad's love and attention, and the life that her and her mother struggled and lived with because of him. That hate, that type of hate doesn't go away, so that's driving her to the point. She's obviously thinking rationally, and she's just willing to burn everything down. She even tells Oliver the truth about the Queen's Gambit, like, oh, I could have stopped it, but I decided not to because he didn't deserve to live, and neither do you. And we have Oliver at the end being crushed by that rock. Dude, that's a heavy-ass situation to find ourselves in. Our heroes are not going... It's not going to be easy for them, because not only are they going to have to try and stop Emiko, they're also going to have to do it once again while being hunted by the city, and there's no holds barred now because they're all responsible for this. This is probably going to be a situation where they're going to have Roy try to run away. That's probably why he never came back to Star City, because he was super freaking wanted for everything that went down. But obviously they're wanted, so it's like the mayor, obviously, she was on the vigilante side, but it's like, oh, no more. So it's interesting to kind of continue to see how we got from there. Like, obviously, a lot of stuff is falling into place to understand how we got to where we are in the future with everything. But there's still a lot of details need to be filled in. Because look at Renee. Like, obviously, you know who Renee is, that he was Mad Dog, yet he's kind of doing what he's doing in the Glades without issues. It doesn't... I guess maybe because he's the only one not fully embracing the vigilante aspect. Maybe it's like Galaxy 1 backed him up with that whole situation, which I'm assuming Galaxy 1 is like maybe future Ninth Circle or something like that. Maybe not. Like, why not just straight up just call them the Ninth Circle? It sounds like they are a completely different group, but maybe they're like a spring off of it. Maybe Emiko's actually alive. Maybe she's been alive this entire time, still leading the group, kind of doing things her own way, kind of working from the shadows. Maybe they think she's dead present day, but in actuality she's been alive this entire time. Me just throwing that out there, but I'm very interested to see, where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, because things are taking a very, very interesting turn with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.